Welcome to the Sewer Wealth Podcast, where we bring you the timeless wisdom of the world's greatest business and wealth-building books. In each episode, we break down proven strategies from legendary minds, so you can apply them to your own journey toward financial freedom and success. So, get ready to unlock the secrets of success, one book at a time.
All right, welcome back to the deep dive. You know how this works. You bring the sources, we mine the insights that matter, and today we're all about building those wealth-building habits, those habits for real wealth, using the wisdom of James Clear's, super popular book, Atomic Habits. But we're not just reading the book, we're layering on some extra savvy.
Yeah. Taking it a step further, we've got some great excerpts from the Sure Wealth podcast, and they're all about applying Clear's principles, specifically to, building financial success. Love their tagline, by the way. Timeless lessons, real wealth, one book at a time. Really sets the stage, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Timeless and real. That's what we're after. Now, the Sure Wealth episode we're diving into today, episode 2, it focuses on that first law of behavior change from Atomic Habits, make it obvious. And they cover chapters 4 through 7, which is, it's where things start to get really interesting in terms of actually putting these ideas into practice.
Yeah. That's where the rubber meets the road. So, ready to get into it.
Absolutely. Let's start with chapter 4. The man who didn't look right. This opening story that Clear tells about, the paramedic who just instinctively senses that something's off with her father-in-law. It's a real attention grabber. Like, she sees him and she just knows. Turns out he's got this, a serious heart condition that even he wasn't aware of.
It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, think about it. She's not even consciously aware of what specific cues she's picking up on. It's years of experience, thousands of patients that have fine-tuned her perception. Her brain's making these lightning-fast connections that she can't even articulate.
Like she's become this human lie detector, but for health. And Clear used this story to make a point, right? To introduce this idea that our brains are these incredible prediction machines. They're constantly analyzing, categorizing, looking for patterns, trying to anticipate what's going to happen next based on what's happened before.
It's true. And he gives those other examples, like the military analyst who can pick out an enemy missile from just a blip on a radar screen, or the art expert who can spot a forgery just by feeling the brushstrokes. They've trained their brains to recognize these subtle, often invisible patterns that most of us would just miss.
Right. And it's not just, those super specialized fields. Clear mentions radiologists predicting strokes, even hairdressers who can sense when a client's pregnant. It's wild. But the point is that, our brains are doing this all the time under the surface, influencing our behaviors, our decisions, without us even being fully aware.
Which brings us to the big question.
Yeah.
What does all this have to do with our habits? And more specifically, with building wealth.
Right. So the takeaway here is if our brains are these, pattern-seeking machines constantly influenced by these cues in our environment, we need to become more aware of the cues that are shaping our financial habits, because those habits, good or bad, they're often running on autopilot.
Exactly. Are you spending money because you genuinely need something, or is it because you walked past that store display, with the bright colors and the catchy music? Are you saving consistently, or is it easy to forget when your savings account is, buried somewhere in your banking app?
It's are we making conscious financial choices, or are we just, reacting to these invisible triggers? That's the question Clear is pushing us to ask. And he gives this great quote from Carl Jung. "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Powerful stuff.
It is. So becoming aware of those unconscious cues that are driving our habits is really the first step towards taking control of our financial lives. And Clear gives us a very practical tool for doing just that, the habit scorecard.
I like this. I love a good practical tool. He starts by describing that system that Japanese train operators use called pointing and calling. Sounds kind of silly at first, right?
Okay.
But it's actually brilliant. These operators physically point at signals and call out their status, basically. They're turning something that could easily become, an automatic, mindless routine into a conscious act.
Yeah, and it has an incredible impact on safety. They've seen something like an 85% reduction in errors and a 30% drop in accidents just by implementing this simple system. Even the New York City subway, they saw a significant decrease in incidents just by adopting a point-only version.
Yeah, it makes you think, right? Like, what if we applied that kind of intentional awareness to our own daily habits, especially those related to money?
Right. And that's precisely what the habit scorecard is designed to do for us. It helps us become more mindful of our behaviors by, basically pointing and calling them out to ourselves.
So walk us through it. How do we actually create a habit scorecard?
So the first step is to actually list out all your daily habits from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep. Everything. Brushing your teeth, checking your phone, eating breakfast, scrolling through social media, all of it.
Okay, got it. Big, long list. And
you go through and you categorize each habit as either good, bad, or neutral, depending on, how it aligns with your overall goals.
Right.
So, for example, if your goal is to, say, lose weight, that late-night snacking habit might be a bad habit.
But for someone trying to, bulk up at the gym, that same snack could be a good habit. So it's really about understanding your own personal context, right?
Absolutely. And even further, Clear points out that there aren't really any inherently good or bad habits. He says all habits ultimately serve a purpose. They solve some kind of problem for us, even the ones we consider bad.
So even procrastination, right? It's solving the problem of, avoiding a task that feels uncomfortable or overwhelming in the moment.
Precisely. So as you're making your habits scorecard, it's not about judging yourself. It's about being honest and objective. Ask yourself, does this behavior, does this specific habit help me become the type of person I want to be? Is it moving me closer to my goals, or is it taking me further away?
And that, of course, includes our financial goals, right? Does spending money on that impulse purchase, does that align with my desire to be a financially responsible person?
Exactly. Now, Clear also suggests that when you're first doing this exercise, try to observe your habits without, judgment or criticism. It's like you're watching someone else go through their day. That way you can start to notice patterns, identify those triggers that might be leading you to act in ways that don't really serve you.
That's interesting, detaching a bit. So instead of saying, ugh, I can't believe I just ate that whole bag of chips, it's more like, okay, interesting. I notice that when I get stressed, I tend to reach for salty snacks.
Exactly. And if you want to take a step further, you can try using that pointing and calling technique for those, those bad habits that you want to change. Like if you find yourself about to mindlessly scroll through online shopping sites, you can say out loud, I'm about to spend time browsing for things I don't need. This will take me further away from my financial goals.
It's almost like you're, snapping yourself out of that autopilot mode. You're making the unconscious conscious.
Exactly. And that's the whole point of this habit scorecard. Becoming aware of our behaviors so that we can start to make more conscious choices. It's the foundation for any lasting change.
All right, so we've got awareness. What's next?
So once you've built awareness with your habit scorecard, we move on to actually implementing new habits. In Chapter 5, the best way to start a new habit, Clee talks about this really interesting research study that was done back in 2001 in Britain, and it was all about building exercise habits.
Okay, yeah, I remember reading about this. Tell me more about it.
So they had three groups of people. One was a control group. They didn't do anything special. Then there was a motivation group. And these folks, they got, all this information about the benefits of exercise, how it's good for your health, all that. And then the third group, this was the implementation intention group. They didn't get any motivational stuff, but they did something different.
What did they do?
They made a very specific plan about when and where they were going to exercise. Like literally writing down, during the next week, I will exercise for at least 20 minutes on day, at time, in place. They filled in the blanks.
So they basically pre-committed to a specific action.
Exactly. And the results were pretty amazing. The implementation intention group, they had a 91% success rate, which was more than double the success rate of the other two groups.
Wow. So just having that specific plan in place made a huge difference. Not just about knowing you should exercise. It's about, actually deciding in advance exactly when and where you're going to do it.
Right. It's about removing the decision-making from the moment, because in the moment, you're more likely to give in to, inertia or distractions.
And this implementation intention technique, it's not just for exercise, right?
Nope, not at all. Clear points out that it's been shown to be effective for all sorts of goals.
Yeah.
Getting your flu shot, remembering to recycle, study regularly, sticking to your budget.
Okay, so how can we apply this, specifically to building wealth?
So instead of just having this vague intention of, I should save more money, You could create a specific implementation intention like, every Friday, right after I get paid, I'm going to transfer $50 from my checking account to my savings account.
I like that. It's simple, it's specific, it's actionable, and it takes that decision fatigue out of the equation.
Exactly. Now, another strategy that Clear talks about, and this one's a personal favorite of mine, it's called habit stacking. It's a really effective way to kind of piggyback new habits onto existing ones.
Tell me more about this, habit stacking.
So it's pretty simple. The basic formula is, after current habit, I will new habit. So you're basically anchoring your new habit to something you already do consistently. Clear gives the example of meditating for 1 minute right after you pour your morning coffee.
Okay, that's interesting. So you're using an existing habit, something you already do automatically, as the trigger for the new habit.
Right. It's like you're tapping into the momentum of your existing routine. And this can be applied to all sorts of things. Like after I brush my teeth at night, I will write down 3 things I'm grateful for in my journal.
I like it. Or after I finish my workday, I'll take a 15-minute walk before I start cooking dinner. It's like building those positive behaviors into the flow of your day.
And it can definitely be applied to financial habits as well. Like after I pay my monthly bills, I will review my budget for the next month. Or after I get my paycheck, I'll automatically transfer 10% to my investment account.
Okay, so habit stacking is a great way to, basically automate those positive behaviors. But how do we know which existing habits to choose as our anchors?
Well, Clear suggests a couple of things. First, make sure the anchor habit is something you do consistently, ideally with a frequency that aligns with the new habit you want to build. So if your new habit is something you want to do daily, choose an anchor habit that you also do daily.
Makes sense. And what else?
You also want to consider the time and location where you're most likely to succeed. Don't try to, cram a complex new habit into a part of your day that's already super hectic.
Right. Like, don't try to start meditating for 20 minutes right after you've gotten the kids ready for school and you're rushing out the door for work.
Exactly. Set yourself up for success. And he also stresses that the cue for your new habit, that trigger, it needs to be very specific and immediately actionable. Like his personal example was he wanted to do push-ups during his lunch break, but lunch break was too vague. He was never quite sure when to do them, so he changed it to, when I close my laptop for lunch, I will do 10 push-ups next to my desk.
I love that. It's so specific. There's no room for interpretation.
Wow.
When you close your laptop, boom, push-ups.
Exactly. So as you're thinking about your financial goals, get really specific with those implementation intentions and those habit stacks. Like instead of just saying, I want to save more money, make it. After I deposit my paycheck, I will immediately transfer $100 to my savings account. Or after I pay my rent each month, I will review my investment portfolio and make any necessary adjustments. Make those cues crystal clear.
Okay, so we've talked about awareness, we've talked about implementation intentions, and we talked about habit stacking. What else does Claire have for us?
Well, in Chapter 6, motivation is overrated. Environment often matters more. He shifts gears a bit and starts talking about the power of our environment in shaping our habits. And he kicks it off with this fascinating study that was done by Anne Thorndike at Massachusetts General Hospital.
Oh yeah, this one's really interesting. I remember being surprised by the results.
So she wanted to see if she could improve the eating habits of hospital employees without, directly telling them what to do or relying on their willpower. So she decided to focus on the hospital cafeteria.
Okay, so what did she do?
She made some really subtle changes to the cafeteria's layout, basically tweaking the choice architecture, as she called it. Like, for example, she added bottles of water to the refrigerators where they kept the sodas, and she put baskets of bottled water near the food stations.
So basically making the healthier option more visible and more convenient.
Exactly. And guess what? It worked. Soda sales went down and water sales went up. And she didn't have to lecture anyone about the benefits of hydration.
It's amazing, isn't it? Just making those small changes to the environment had a significant impact on people's choices.
And it highlights something really important for all of us, especially when it comes to our financial habits. We're often far more influenced by our surroundings than we realize. Claire even quotes Kurt Lewin, a psychologist who said, behavior is a function of the person and their environment.
Right. It's not just about who we are. It's about where we are and what surrounds us.
Exactly. And Clear gives those other examples too, like how grocery stores strategically place certain items at eye level or on those end cap displays to encourage us to buy them. It's not by accident, it's by design.
Oh, I know this one. Like the candy bars at the checkout line. They know you're standing there waiting, maybe a little bored, and boom, temptation strikes.
Precisely. It's about making those impulse buys more obvious, more accessible, more appealing. And Clear goes even deeper into this idea by talking about the importance of our senses, especially our vision. He points out that the majority of our sensory receptors are dedicated to sight, and a huge chunk of our brain power is devoted to processing visual information.
So we're wired to be influenced by what we see.
Absolutely. And the great thing is we can use this to our advantage. We can actually design our environments to make the cues for our good habits more obvious and the cues for our bad habits less so.
Give us some examples of how we can do that, specifically in terms of managing our money.
Sure. So if your goal is to save more money, you could put a visual reminder of your savings goal somewhere prominent, like on your refrigerator or on your desk. You could also make it easier to access your savings account by, moving the app icon to the front page of your phone or setting up automatic transfers.
And if you're trying to spend less, you could, unsubscribe from those tempting email newsletters from your favorite stores, or remove those shopping apps from your phone's home screen.
Exactly. You're basically reducing your exposure to the triggers that lead to those unwanted behaviors.
And this is essentially the opposite of the first law, right? Instead of making it obvious, you're making it invisible.
Precisely. And it can be surprisingly effective. Just those small changes to your environment can really make a difference in your ability to stick to your goals.
All right, we're almost at the end here. What about Chapter 7?
Chapter 7, The Secret to Self-Control. This is a great one. Clear starts by sharing this surprising finding about heroin addiction rates among U.S. soldiers who were serving in Vietnam. And it goes against a lot of what we've been taught about addiction.
Yeah, this one always makes me think. Tell me more about it.
So during the Vietnam War, heroin use was rampant among soldiers. Something like 20% of them were addicted at some point during their tour.
Wow, that's a really high rate.
Yeah, it was a huge problem. But what's really interesting is that when these soldiers came home, the relapse rates were shockingly low.
Really? That's counterintuitive. You'd think returning home, after experiencing such intense trauma would be a prime trigger for relapse.
Right. But Lee Robbins, the researcher who studied this phenomenon, she found that only 5% of those soldiers relapsed within a year of coming home, and only 12% relapsed within 3 years.
Those numbers are incredibly low, considering the high rates of addiction they started with.
Exactly. And it challenged a lot of assumptions about addiction being this permanent, intractable condition. So what explains those low relapse rates?
Well, Clear suggests it was largely due to the change in environment. The soldiers were removed from the context, the triggers, the cues that had led them to use heroin in the first place.
Right. Back home, they were no longer surrounded by the constant stress and danger of war, the easy access to the drug, the social pressure from their peers. It was a completely different environment.
So basically, their bad habit was extinguished, not because they suddenly developed more willpower, but because they were no longer exposed to the cues that had triggered it.
Exactly. And this is a huge takeaway for us, especially when it comes to our financial habits. It means that instead of just trying to resist temptation through sheer force of will, which can be incredibly difficult and often unsustainable, we can be more strategic by focusing on optimizing our environment to make those temptations less accessible, less appealing.
So what does that look like in practice? Give us some examples.
Sure. If you find yourself, impulsively shopping online late at night, you could block those shopping sites during those hours. If you tend to overspend when you're out with certain friends, maybe suggest meeting for a walk in the park instead of going to a bar or restaurant.
If you have trouble sticking to your budget, you could switch to using cash for those categories where you tend to overspend. That way you have a visual reminder of how much you're actually spending.
Exactly. It's about creating those little barriers, those little speed bumps that make it harder for those bad habits to take hold. And Clear emphasizes that this isn't about becoming a hermit or depriving yourself of enjoyment. It's about being mindful of the cues that trigger those unwanted behaviors and finding creative ways to minimize your exposure to them.
So it's like we're stacking the deck in our favor, setting ourselves up for success by making the good choices easier and the bad choices harder.
Exactly. And that's the ultimate secret to self-control. It's not about willpower. It's about environment design. It's about being the architect of our own habits.
So, to wrap it all up, Clear's first law of behavior change, make it obvious, is about bringing those unconscious habits to the surface through awareness, then using tools like implementation intentions and habit stacking to build new positive habits, and finally, redesigning our environment to make those good habits more obvious and the bad habits less so.
Exactly. And next time, we'll be diving into the second law of behavior change, make it attractive. So stay tuned for that.
This has been a truly enlightening exploration of how we can apply these principles from atomic habits to create a more financially sound and fulfilling life.
Absolutely. As you move forward, we encourage you to take some time to really consider those cues in your own environment that might be influencing your financial habits. What can you make more obvious? What can you make invisible? What small changes can you make today to start building those atomic habits that will lead to big results over time?
If you found this deep dive valuable and you want to dive even deeper into these powerful strategies for habit transformation, we highly recommend checking out James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. It's a game changer.
And we've made it super easy for you to do just that. There's a link in the description below where you can grab a copy of the book. Plus, if you use our link to make your purchase, you'll be supporting the deep dive, which helps us keep bringing you more valuable content.
So hit that link, get the book, start building those atomic habits.
And join us next time as we continue to explore the world of habits and how they can shape our lives,